I needed to be able to showcase something that we did, whether it was AI, automation, just that mindset around it, and be able to demonstrate a win off of that and to show my CEO like, no, I really think if we have intentional effort, we could really change a lot of the way that we work. When I think about change management, I think about my certification in it. It's like, you got to start with like the with them. And he's like, well, what the hell is that? I'm like, it's what's in it for me. Every employee is going to want to know what's in it for me. And I was like, we know what's in it for the company, like what the potential outcomes could look like. But we need the employees to be able to see themselves in this change and like why they should give a damn other than like what it does for the company, which ultimately as it will trickle down to them as well.
You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. All right, let's do this. I feel like we should have hit record 11 minutes ago when you hopped on, Sarika. We just like jumped right in it, but we're so happy to have you here. How you doing?
I'm great. I am so excited to be here. I was obviously telling you all this before, but I feel like I know the two of you through friends, through our, HR community online, but I never like had a chance to really connect with you all in person, or virtually. So I am very stoked to be here with you both today.
I feel like we have so many mutual friends, connections.
Yeah.
I think it was Jeet from Kinfolk that put us in touch. Is that right?
Yeah.
You're also like somewhat involved in the like Hibosphere. Is that right?
Oh, I like that.
I don't know if anybody's ever said that, but
I've never heard that, but I'm going to like text her after this. Hibosphere. Yes, I am part of the Hibosphere. Him and I met 3 years ago now, actually. 3 years ago, like probably a month ago. And when she tells the story, it's actually pretty funny because I reached out to her on LinkedIn. I was like in between jobs. I like decided to step away from a job and took some time off. And then I was like back on the market, kind of wanting to see what I wanted to do next. And I really loved her content. So I reached out to her on LinkedIn when I noticed that she lives in my area in Northern Virginia. And I was like, hey, oh my gosh, I love your content. I've been following you. Like, I'd love to meet for coffee. Like, I've been remote for so long. It'd be fun to meet. And she tells the story about how I'm her first online friend or online connection turned friend in real life. And she was telling her husband, like, this woman wants to meet me, but I don't know. I'm like, here's my, I'm going to have my tracker on, like track me. If you don't hear from me, check in on me. Who knows what's going to happen? And then like literally within the first 2 minutes of us meeting, we were like immediate besties. But she loves telling people this story.
That's hilarious. She was like, is this a stalker?
She's like, stalker vibes.
Yeah. I think I could see how I might give off stalker vibes. I'm just very energetic and like animated. So if you don't know any better, I could see that could throw you off. But lucky for us, we've been like pretty much inseparable ever since. And it's been awesome.
Love it.
That's awesome. Well, we start every episode with good news stories.
Okay.
So anything that's coming to mind for you, it could be personal, it could be work related, just a fun way for us to kick off the show.
You had told me last time that we were going to do this. Well, I mean, I'm just excited that I get to, this is my last like full working week of the year. And I'm going to take the next couple of weeks off and spend time with my family, do a little staycation in DC with my kids and my husband, and do a whole lot of nothing. So that's my good news story, I guess, to end out the year. I should come up with something more profound, but I just don't have one yet.
No, I think that's the perfect good news. I'm going to go with Christmas good news. So this is the first Christmas that I will be spending in Austin with my parents since 2017. Oh. Since I've been with my wife, she's an only child, and we typically do Thanksgiving in Austin, and then we do Christmas in Laredo, which is where she's from.
Okay.
Her parents are renting a house 5 doors down from us ever since the baby was born. And so they're going to stay here for Christmas. And this is the first time that I'll get to have it here in my hometown with my parents. Well, both of our families will be there.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, that's amazing.
I tried to like lie to myself the last like 4 or 5 years. I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's not even going to be the same as it used to anyway, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to love it, especially like having a little one at home.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It makes it so much more. It brings I know he's like young, but it brings the magic back, I feel like.
We were talking about like needing to do more social posts. Daniel, you need to get like a personal photo dump on LinkedIn because your daughter is so stinking cute. Like every time he flashes up, a photo. She's just got like the
I do it way too much.
cheekies, and
I
she's like
feel
a
like you should do it
doll,
now. I feel like you should do it
literal doll. Yeah,
now.
do it
Fine.
now while
Do
I'll
it
give
now.
Mike.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
look at that.
Look at her cheeks.
Sweet
I know, she's
thing.
adorable.
Mija. Oh my
I
God.
told you this last time, but I am so jealous that you have a baby. Like, I would love to go back to the baby phase. I mean, 11 and 13, I mean, Stephen, you're in even more in like the teenage land, but it's just different. It's fun.
It is different.
But it's different. Oh, baby land.
Well, you know, I'm about to go back into that mode. And so my
That's
good
true.
news, we have like multiple recordings today and like 4 recordings this week because we're like in the catch Stephen before he goes into pat leave. But my good news for this conversation is that I cleaned out our shed. And I know that sounds super lame,
Good on you.
but our shed was, so we rent in Austin and eventually we're going to move to the Pacific Northwest because that's where my wife is from. And so we've got like 4 more years here in Austin while the 2 teenage daughters that we co-parent, they graduate and move on with their lives. And so we love our house, we love our neighborhood, but the shed that came with the house like has a bunch of the owner's crap in it. And I felt weird taking all, like reorganizing it when it just had like all their stuff just kind of laid out, which was frustrating, but whatever. So over time, I've like compartmentalized, I've tried to like organize around their stuff. And for the last year, it's just been a complete disaster. Like we've just had things and shoved things in there and like out of sight, out of mind. And I had this past weekend, I like woke up cold sweat moment of my in-laws coming in town because we like literally due date is December 26th. I think they arrive on Sunday for like 3 weeks. Like everyone's just kind of has their lives on pause while we wait for baby boy to join. And so I had this like horrible cold sweat moment, leap out of bed, and I'm like, I gotta clean the shed. Like I just had a vision of her parents going in the shed and like just being mortified at how we live our lives. And so I was like, I gotta deal with this. And I knocked it out.
Shed?
It's not a big shed. And that's the thing, is like when I actually did it, when I cleaned it out, and like that said, there were probably 8 Goodwill bags. Because, you know, the years from like 10 to like 12, 14, like those years of a young person, a lot of changes. So like stuffies are going out and they go through huge growth spurt and like the old soccer stuff. So like we just had all these bags. It was like, what do we do with all this stuff? And so we had a mass Goodwill trip. But all that to say, the shed looks great. You walk in, you can find things, there's space to move around. So that's my good news. I took way too long on my good news. Sorry, Daniel.
Big project. I love it.
I mean, that's real. Like our garage is a disaster. And every time my in-laws see it, they're like, oof, like you need to do something about that.
And I feel like there's like a slight judgment. There's like a slight judgment in there. Like you should be a better dad, a better husband with the shed and garage. It's like, oh.
This is the kick in the ass I needed to do this weekend. So maybe next week I'll report back with the same news.
All right.
I'm putting out good juju for you, Daniel.
Okay, so Sarika.
Yes.
Give us the full story. Like, where did you start in your career? Give us a few of the twists and turns. How did all of your career lead you to being the now Chief People Officer at Vidyard? We did a webinar recently on how HR teams are actually using AI, and we had people like Brandon Samut on there from Zapier, and we kept coming back to the same idea. AI only matters if it makes insights usable, and that's exactly what ChartHop has built with AskChartHop. Instead of having to dig through spreadsheets or click through a maze of filters, you can literally type a question and get the answer that you want instantly. Whether that's org charts, churn risk, hiring timelines, pay equity views, headcount plans, all of that can be generated in seconds. When Stephen and I saw this live at HR Tech, we were genuinely blown away. I could totally see this being great for an HR leader who needs quick help to prepare for a board report or has to answer a question that comes up at their next C-suite meeting. Like, what better superpower could a people leader have? And so if you've been looking for something like this and you want to see what it looks like in real life, you can try AskChartHop at charthop.com/AI. That's charthop.com/AI.
It's yes, I've had a lot of twists and turns in my career. So it all started on, no, I'm just kidding. So I went to undergrad at University of Virginia. So only 2 hours south of where I live now. And at UVA, they would always bring in organizations, big companies to come in and interview like your senior year. And then you can interview and then potentially have a job offer before you even graduate. So went through that process. I interviewed with a bunch of companies. I ended up getting a job offer with Philip Morris USA, now known as Altria. Yes, a cigarette, tobacco company, Marlboro, Parliament, the whole kit and caboodle. So I went to go work with them coming right out of undergrad as a territory sales manager, which was cool because I wasn't working in an office. I worked out of a minivan. Truly, they gave each of us a minivan, and I would like partner with pretty much anywhere that you can think of that sells cigarettes, like gas stations, 7-Elevens, or like big wholesalers like Costco. And then I would drive around, and then I would also drive a lot to Richmond, which is where their headquarters is, and to like our district office in Maryland. So I did that for about 6 or 7 years. And while I was at Philip Morris, and I loved that job, by the way, they have deep pockets. So they really invested heavily in sales training and enablement. So I just felt like I learned a lot about business and not just marketing and sales, but like how to manage a budget, how do you manage your account, P&L. It was just like a really great crash course, but they also paid for my MBA. And I was like, well, if you're going to give me a free MBA, I'm going to do it. So I worked full time and I went part time and got my MBA at GW. Being that I live in the DC area, a very big market is, management consulting with a specific focus in supporting the federal government, also known as GovCon or government contracting. And I decided I knew I wasn't going to move to Richmond or wherever. So I'm like, all right, I want to try something different. I want to go into management consulting. So I found my way into consulting, and then I was at 2 different startups, and it was the second startup that ended up growing really, really quickly. And it was just like, I think I was employee 60 or 70 when I joined. And I joined as an assistant or deputy program manager, managing a new contract for the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. And I did that. I got unexpectedly pregnant with my second. And then I ended up taking some time off and going back. And then when I went back, I started managing more and more programs and then became a portfolio manager. But the company kept growing. And as you know, in a startup that grows really quickly, you can wear a lot of different hats if you want to. And my mindset at the time was, I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can about how to build a government contracting business because I want to do this on my own one day. Because I always thought that I wanted to be an entrepreneur like my father until the 2008 recession happened. And then after that, my parents were impacted. I was like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. But I got to do a lot of things. I did a lot of stuff in operations. I did a lot of stuff within business development. I used to write proposals. I used to work directly with clients. I managed people. One thing I never did was finance. And it's like the running joke with me and my girlfriend, who is now a CFO, that I'm just not the greatest. That's not my wheelhouse. But I wore a lot of hats. I grew really quickly with it. I moved up. I created jobs for myself while I was there. And one of the jobs I created was called Director of Client Delivery Excellence. And the whole concept was okay, how do we scale our offerings? And obviously our business was people, right? Being able to deliver people that could deliver our services. But how do we scale this? How do we make sure that we're being consistent? I hate the word standardization, but that's literally what we were trying to do. And then it led into a lot of manager enablement. And then it eventually was well, how do we think about our next gen leaders? I didn't know at that time that what I was essentially doing was talent development. And eventually, and at that point, HR was much more of a reactive function, sort of the old school way of doing HR, employee relations. You may have performance process, but it wasn't exactly a forward-looking strategic function. And then at a certain point, we had grown so quickly. I think at that point, we were probably 500-ish employees in matter of 3 years. And I started to research more about talent management. I ended up creating a framework because what I saw when we were growing was the business was operating in a silo away from, our back office operations. So HR and the business weren't talking to each other. Even people that were delivering with clients weren't talking to business development. And so I wanted to break down the silos. That's how I came up with what I call the ITM framework. I pitched it to my CEO and he was like, this is so cool. Great. Yay. But I'm going to sell the company. And then we brought in a private equity company, a new CEO. And I ended up doing a lot with M&A and integration with them, which was another really cool sort of pivot, and learned a lot about that because we knew that we were going to grow inorganically and organically. So the inorganic would be, we'll continue to acquire companies with the idea that they were going to sell. So once I kind of got to know the new leadership, I pitched the same idea. And then that's how I found my way into the world of sort of HR and people, was truly by talent management. And I pitched the idea and I was like, here's what I want to do. I'm going to do these 3 things. And if I don't need a team, I'll do this cross-functionally. And if I do these three things and these are the KPIs by the end of the year and I succeed, then you have to let me build a team. And so they were like, okay, bet, let's go do it. And then I did it. So like after a year, I delivered on the three things I said I would deliver on, and which was build an internal mobility program. People could move into different roles inside the company and people don't have to leave to find their new jobs, build career paths and competencies that get tied to performance, and then bring in-house, implement a learning management system and like build out like and attach that to like levels, competencies, et cetera. So I did all three of those things. And then that's when I became VP of talent. I did that for some time and I eventually left there. I was there for it was a long time, 7-8 years. By the time I left, we were like 1,700 employees. I had already done like 5 acquisitions. And that's how I found my way into tech. I had an external mentor another one of those, I guess I do give stalker vibe. This external mentor of mine is a woman that I met online. She was, before Ceridian went public, she took Ceridian Dayforce public. She was a product leader that became the CPO, and her name was Lisa Sterling. And I reached out to her and I was like, I haven't seen anybody like pivot outside of HR into HR. I keep getting told like, I have no business being in HR because I haven't done HR my whole life. And I was like, why? Like, I understand the business and I'm trying to like bridge the gap between these two things. Like, I think I'm like really well suited for this. And her and I she'd been mentoring me, and she was starting a new company right before COVID started. And it was a company based out of Denver, a tech company that was going to go public. She said, come join me, do what you did here, but on a global scale, 7 countries, larger company, about 2,000 employees, and do what you did here, and then expand your scope. And so that's what I did. And that was my first foray into tech. I did that for a year and a half. We went IPO'd on NASDAQ. Very interesting experience doing this on a like multi-global scale. So I almost felt like that was like a crash course in and of itself of HR or, people and culture and sort of the public sector, but across so many countries, learning all the things across the countries, implementing systems. Like they didn't have a business partner model. We implemented that. They didn't have a career framework, a job architecture. They didn't have training. They didn't have any of that stuff. They basically just had like more of they had recruitment and they had like employee relations. And so I got to do that on a much larger scale. And then eventually I left after about a year and a half. And then I found my way to Vidyard, and I've been doing similar, but on a smaller scale here at Vidyard. So very long-winded approach, but all that to say, back and forth, up and down. Like my career's kind of done a lot of pivoting, a lot of zigzagging, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Another tick in the non-traditional HR career path bucket. And I love your story. And I love the non-traditional folks that like weren't intentionally, didn't have a plan to go into HR, but like meandered and life just kind of made it happen. And so the things that I related to in your story, my only job offer that I had coming out of college, and I'm a lot older than y'all, this is 1999. Coming out of UT Austin, was a regional sales role at Philip Morris. And I was like, I was like, I didn't take, so it was literally the only offer. I think like Gallo, the wine company, I don't know why I was only getting interviews for like beer and wine or like spirits and cigarettes. And I didn't even get an offer from Gallo and Philip Morris. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to take this $35K sales job offer from Philip Morris. And then like in the 11th hour, Ernst & Young made me an offer, and it was for expat global mobility consulting. And that's the only reason that I didn't. But I always tell the story, like the only offer I had was with Philip Morris. And like, I often wonder where my career would have gone if I had done that. But obviously I wouldn't change a thing.
It's a great company.
Yeah. I remember just being super impressed with all like the interviews. I was like a former smoker at that point. I had smoked when I was a teenager, and I was like, I don't know if I wouldn't need to put myself around that. But neither here nor there. The other thing that really related to your story is the notion of like having to look a certain way, like your career path in order to be considered an HR person. I've never understood the mindset within HR, and it exists today. Like if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see posts like, that's not real HR, or like you have to have this kind of experience to be a real HR person. And I'm like, wait a second. I thought like as a practice, we're like trying to be inclusive of all the different experiences and all the different paths. But so I love that you stuck with it. I love that, you
I
took
had to
your,
leave to like really get what I needed out of like to be able to like ask, really accelerate where I knew I wanted to go. I think, it's interesting. Like I think often, not always fondly at those moments of like when I felt like I was like, I just gotta go because I don't think this is gonna, and that was a big shock to like the company because I was been there for so long. I was the culture carrier. I built this thing that everybody was like, really, it was a core pillar of the private equity and the CEO's strategy for building the business and what they were going to sell. I look back on it and I think it was fear for folks that have been in HR their whole career and like that's what they knew. I think I didn't look the same. I didn't talk the same. I had a very different perspective. And I think it was more fear based and telling me like, okay, you can't do this because you haven't done this, and this, and you're not SHRM certified and you're not there. And I'm like, but why does that even matter? I'm like in the business. In fact, actually this is like a superpower because I know our clients. I've delivered in the business. I know what it's like to be on client side. I understand where the challenges are. I understand how hard it is to like be part of a company, but then you're also part of this contract. So you're kind of part of the agency you're supporting. And how do you culturally manage both of those environments, which is really challenging when you're in consulting in particular, but it's fear. They didn't want to change. They didn't know how to change. They didn't know if they were ready for the change. They didn't know if they would succeed in the change. That ultimately came even when I left. Like change continued to happen. And I get that, right? Like living in the world now with AI transformation, like I 100%
there's a lot
get
of fear.
this fear
Yeah, a
of
lot
the
of fear.
unknown and this fear of like, well, what if I can't do it and everybody's different. Like I thrive in fear a little bit and in change, but other people don't. They just, it stalls them. It makes them freeze. And you have different people for kind of the same thing. You have different people for different reasons, doing different jobs, different roles, different skill sets. We want to be inclusive. But I think I've just learned a lot. Because I used to be really angry about it for like years. I was like, I didn't want to leave there. And I made the decision. It was my personal decision because I felt like that was the only way I was going to learn. And I'll be honest with you, I don't regret the decision because I don't think I would have learned what I learned as quickly as I learned it, especially on a global scale, which opened such a wide door for me on like being able to pivot in so many directions in my career next. And I don't think it would have been as easy to get into tech without having somebody that brought me in and believed in me, even though I didn't have a tech background, because I had applied to other tech jobs and they're like, well, you don't have tech, like you don't have SaaS experience. I mean, how many times have you read a JD even now where it's like, must have SaaS experience? I mean, I don't know
It's
that
wild. Again, I will never wrap my head around like it has to look this way for it to work at our company or in this industry. I won't get that. But we have a lot we want to talk to you about, and going along the tech angle, I think that's a good segue. So I have heard of Vidyard. I love to nerd out on all things sales and marketing and any kind of hack or tip or trick to improve sales and revenue growth like Daniel and I are just obsessed with. And so I've heard of Vidyard, but I'm guessing a lot of our audience members have not. And so, when you're at a party or you're, at a bar, whatever, doing your thing, and someone's like, oh, what is Vidyard? Like, how do you explain the business to people?
Hey everyone, really quick. I can already tell that this is going to be an episode where you're going to want to take a lot of notes. And that's kind of a pain in the butt when you're casually listening. So we have made it super easy for you. And we've turned the entire episode into a downloadable PDF so that you can enjoy the conversation and grab the notes later. The link is in the description below. So go grab that before you forget. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah. So I often tell people it's a AI and video enabled go-to-market tool that allows us to connect with our buyers more efficiently and personalize ourselves and our value at scale. I would have said something maybe a little bit different when I first started 3 years ago, but the product has evolved over the last couple of years because of AI. I'm sure my CEO will kill me for this, but I'm like, oh, have you heard of like a tool like Loom? So it's like that, but it's like whereas Loom is much more horizontal, like it's for all sorts of comms. Vidyard has always positioned themselves as a tool, like square in the middle of go-to-market, especially for sales and marketing. And so that's usually how. And then I get into all the like, oh, you can build your own avatar, and this is how I use my avatar. But there's like all these use cases, and then people start to get then they get more into it. Like, whoa, you have an avatar? Like, how'd you do that? What does that mean? But it's been a very exciting time as we've like layered in all the AI capabilities. But you all know, like, this also is a very like difficult market. Go-to market tools are, there's a lot of them. It's hard. That's why partnerships with some of these larger platforms and CRMs like Salesforce, HubSpot, ZoomInfo, Gong, try to make sure we have like really easy integrations with a lot of these systems. So, where your system of record is probably often like your CRM. You should be able to connect with your buyers right out of your CRM, and having like a really easy integration with Vidyard makes it easy for you to actually like either use your avatar or use a video of yourself. But yeah, it's been a very exciting journey.
I've used Vidyard, and I'm sure the product has come a long way since I used it. This is
Yeah.
back in like, it must have been, I don't know, 2018, 2019,
Oh yeah.
2020. I can't remember if it was at Workify when I was working with Steven or if it was at Udacity. But I remember like for a few months, like the highest performing outbound message would be like you get like a whiteboard and you're like holding it up at the beginning of the video and it has like their name
Oh
and it has like
yes,
the
I've seen
company in
this.
it. You know what I'm talking about? And I
Yes.
remember
I remember that era.
Yes.
yeah, so that's what I think of when I think of Vidyard. I'm sure it's way more advanced now and you can do some crazy stuff, but I've
Yeah.
definitely used
I
Vidyard. And
wasn't there for that era of what you're talking about, but it's so funny. I've had so many people, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my gosh, I made this video years ago. And like, here I am in the video. And it's that exact video that you're talking about. Or like, but yeah, no, yes, the product has definitely come a long way since, 2020, which has been the exciting part. But it's also, it's challenging because, you're almost in some ways, a lot of folks that are layering AI into an already existing tool are almost in some cases refining product market fit. And what is that value that you're bringing to your customers now that you layer it in AI, and that value might look and feel different than what it was pre-AI. And I think that is an interesting challenge for not just like our go-to-market teams, but I think also our product teams on like building something that is really valuable, that is need to have and not a nice to have in this era. And I think that's also what's harder and a little bit fundamentally different than some of the AI native companies that are coming out, because they've been building with AI in mind from the beginning. So they don't have all that technical debt built up, and trying to like retrofit something into something that is like a different staging environment or developer environment. You got to update that to like layer in and do all the complex things you want with AI. Like it's just different, and it's a different level of complexity. And like you had mentioned Jeet earlier, like I was a customer of Kinfolk first, and then I became an advisor, and we often go really deep into their product on like, okay, here's how we're using it. Here's what's working. Here's what's not. And we talk a lot about this. I'm like, gosh, like, feels so much easier for you to be able to pivot and do this and this. Whereas like in my organization, like that would take so much longer.
yeah.
And he's like, why? And I was like, well, we have more people. And also like you have this debt built up and you have these environments you're building in, and there's like multiple environments. You have to connect these two things. And it's just, I have found it so fascinating, these entry points for these companies of where they're building AI, which has been like it's also been like a really great eye opener in terms of how we drive the understanding about AI and the adoption, within our own organization. Because you will also have people who expect perfection from newer AI native products and I'm like, well, how do we expect them to be perfect when AI is iterating on the hour, every hour?
Yeah.
And like, we aren't even as far along in what we layer in with our AI, right? Like it's the same challenges and trying to find that value proposition as anybody else. I think it's been an interesting journey being on this side of it.
I feel like that's the perfect segue into today's topic. And last week at MPL Live, this was really the topic, or this was the theme, the overarching theme of the 2 days, the change management aspect of AI. As you said, you have some companies that are AI native and that this is how they've been building forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, 100-year-old companies with like processes that they've been sticking with for the last 40, 50 years. And then somewhere in between, you have everybody else like Vidyard, who is a tech company and is still having to reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one thing that stuck with me the most, or one of the things that stuck with me most from last week, was something that Shreya Josephson said. So Shreya is the SVP of business transformation at RGA. It's one of the big ad agencies. And she was talking about how a big problem that a lot of companies make is the CEO comes in with this mandate, we need AI, and everybody just frantically tries to do AI. And that looks different for everybody because everybody has a different idea of what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And her tip for the audience was start with like the vision and the ambition. What does it actually mean to do AI? And then go from there. And then she had like a 5 or 6 step process. And so I'm curious for you at Vidyard, what did this look like? Like, what was the initial mindset shift and how did you kick off this change? One quick story before we get back to the episode. You may have seen that Grok recently made the news with a $20 billion agreement with NVIDIA. And one of the reasons that they've been able to move so quickly is how they support their leadership team. Instead of overloading their people team or expecting execs to manage everything themselves, Grok built a dedicated executive assistant team with a mix of in-house EAs and more than 10 executive assistants from Viva. Viva manages the EA team from end to end, from hiring and matching to training and security, so that leaders can stay focused on delegating and making decisions. And according to their CEO, the impact shows up fast. Jonathan Ross from Grok said, "My Viva EA is the first executive assistant I've ever had who's as obsessed with the details and getting things right as I am." So if you're thinking about how you can help yourself or your leadership team operate at a higher level, go book a conversation with Viva. Just go to execviva.com/MPL. That's execviva.com/MPL, or you can click the link in the show notes below.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And we noodled on the exact same thing that you just mentioned. It's like, do we send, does my CEO send some mandate? Because when ChatGPT first came out, I would say that, our developer community sort of leaned in the quickest, right? Because I think that's where you could very quickly see immediate leverage for developers. And then of course, all these other tools started to follow pretty quickly. And what I had started observing about a year in, I would say probably early last summer, I was like, oh, well, I don't think everybody's prioritizing the use of AI or trying to test with AI tools. So I went to my CEO and I was like, I think we may need to build a priority around this, or maybe we should talk about this. Maybe someone should own this. I would love to do that. He's like, well, no, I don't think so. I think all the functional leaders you all are leading it within your own teams and your functions. And, that's probably fine. And, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not really sure. So then that's sort of where I started thinking about our onboarding process I didn't love, and it was very manual, and we were missing things, and managers weren't completing their tasks, and that impacts the new hires experience, and my team was frustrated, and I had this resource that was managing setting up calendar invites, and I'm like, God, this is what a lame job to that is the primary, between scheduling talent acquisition interviews and doing this. I'm like, that's not cool. I could totally have this person be doing so much more development, so much cooler stuff. And then I stumbled across Kinfolk by way, I think Open.org. I follow them on LinkedIn, and they talked a lot about, and they talked about Kinfolk. So I was like, oh, I'm going to reach out to this guy, G. I was like, hey, I have this pilot in mind that I want to do. I'm not going to go all in on your tool, but I want to build a pre-boarding experience, and then I want to, and an onboarding experience, reimagine that and automate. Is that something you could do? They're like, yeah, we could do that. We have this thing called Runbooks. I was like, cool. So I negotiated, why don't we do a pilot? You don't charge me a lot. You can use me as a case study. You can use our name. And I was like, I need this because I knew I needed a win. I needed to be able to showcase something that we did, whether it was AI, automation, just that mindset around it, and be able to demonstrate a win off of that, and to show my CEO no, I really think if we have intentional effort, we could really change a lot of the way that we work. And so we went up, we went down that pilot, and we can dig into that. But that then let me come back to my CEO early this year. And I was like, okay, I really think that we need to think about AI transformation being a priority. And then he was much more open to it. I had showed him the numbers. I'm like, this is what we did. This, here's what we're trying to do in CS. How are we going to do that if we don't have concerted, someone helping drive that change? And then it was about March of this year where he's like, okay, let's do it. And then he and I went back and forth. I'm like, well, how do we want to approach this with the company? I don't want to scare people. And then you sending an email that I've seen other companies do, code red, drop everything, AI, apply everything, AI your whole life. I'm like, I don't think that's inspiring. I want to inspire people. When I think about change management, I think about my certification in it. It's you got to start with the WIFM. And he's like, well, what the hell is that? I'm like, it's what's in it for me. Every employee is going to want to know what's in it for me. And I was like, we know what's in it for the company, what the potential outcomes could look like, but we need the employees to be able to see themselves in this change and why they should give a damn, other than what it does for the company, which ultimately as it will trickle down to them as well. But they don't always connect those dots that way. And so we did end up, we ended up not doing an email. We have a ritual that we do. It's now every other Tuesday, but it's a Tuesday stand up with the company. And it's, we talk about all the things that are going on across the business. We talk about our wins of the week, like who's doing what extraordinary things. And I then introduced, I think it was late March, early April, I introduced, hey guys, like we are prioritizing for the new fiscal year that kicks off in May. We are going to really focus on AI, and here's why. And I kind of gave my, I said, I'm pretty animated and very passionate. So I gave my passionate, like inspirational speech on like why I think this is so important, where I think the future is going, what it means for their development and for skills in the company, and garnered a lot of excitement. That was the starting point for us. And then of course, what I was trying to do was dispel the fears. And so we had these open office hours where people could come in and ask whatever questions they had, the fears that they had, they could come to me one-on-one. And it opened the door. A lot of people were like, I'm kind of scared about this, or I'm kind of scared about that. And are you going to tie this to our performance right away? And like, what, I'm not the most savvy with tech. And, all these things started coming out as to like why people might be resistant. And then you had another group of people who were like, yes, I can't wait. Like, this is amazing. And then, you're hiring people, and we're talking about what we're building with our product, like, yes, I want to go to an AI company. That's why I came here. Yes. So you had like these two camps and then a few in the middle. We just started having fun with it, right? Like we were like, okay, let's have a Slack tchannel. And these are like 3 or 4 like kitschy names I came up with. Let's vote on it. They came up with like AI, AI captain. And we could I started off by like dropping in memes when I first launched the website, the Slack channel. I'm like, here's what this is going to be used for. It's for jokes, it's for memes, but it's also for like use cases, lessons learned. Like, I want you all to share and build out in the open, because that's how we're going to learn from each other. And that sort of started to take a life of its own. And so we started very grassroots. I didn't even have like a full-on strategy yet. It was just, let's just get it out there. Let's start talking about it. Let's have some fun with it. I posted, I'm like, did you know you could ask like ChatGPT to roast you? Here's my roast, here's my prompt, and here's how it roasted me. And the roast was actually kind of mean, but I put it out there, vulnerably. And like that started a whole trend of people, GPT roast. And that's where we really started. And it worked for it worked for the people I had in my organization that like to have fun with it. And of course it's come a long way since then, but that was our starting.
I will preface by saying I am an AI optimist. I am AI bullish, but I think for the first time, I am like concerned.
Yes.
I've always had concerns just because, come on, who hasn't seen Terminator? And if you haven't seen Terminator, go watch Terminator, because this shit was predicted decades ago. Or yeah, maybe don't. It depends. Yeah, like do what feels right. But fear. Let's talk about fear. I am shocked. I won't go into like what led to these conversations. I shared a little bit about this at MPL Live last week, but I am shocked at the number of people, HR leaders, that have shared with me how they've done an internal survey to gauge so they're in their own transformation journeys. Yep. They are maybe further ahead than a lot of organizations, but they're kind of like in that weird, not seeing a ton of traction phase. Yeah. And they're but they're also seeing benefits, and they're wanting to like really get a breakthrough moment. And they're like, all right, let's like survey our HR teams and get feedback on like what's working, what's not working, maybe some concerns. And I haven't heard of an HR team that has gotten more than 50% response rate from their HR teams. Some have even had as low as like 15, 20%. And this is the HR team. And for me,
just the HR team in specific?
Just the HR team specifically, yeah. And having run an engagement survey company, like I always said, like the level of participation you're seeing from HR is a gauge about what general sentiment is at the company. And so like if HR isn't sharing, if they're not engaging, like that's a red alert. Like that is a major, major problem. And what that tells me is like there's still a lot of fear within our practitioner and within the HR space. And like, why do you think that's the case? Like sitting in your seat, you mentioned performance. Maybe we're tying this to the wrong outcomes and behaviors. Like, what are your thoughts there? Because I just find that shocking. And I'm honestly really, really concerned about the future, because if HR is not on board and ready, like it just feels like that's going to be a problematic for the future.
So I think there could be a host of different reasons why that's happening. And I don't know that it will be the same company to company. But immediately where I go to is, okay, what is the overall culture of that organization, such that is this a culture where you're free to experiment, fail out loud, and learn from that? Or is it much more of a, we say that, but what we really mean is like, you better be able to like drive your outcomes and your objectives, and very KPI driven. Everything's about the KPI and tied back to your performance. And if you don't do this, then you're out, right? There's an element of that. And then you layer that in with like, how many layoffs have we seen over the last, 2 years alone within SaaS in particular? I mean, we're seeing it everywhere, but like particularly in tech. And even in these largest of companies that people that were in those businesses thought that they were like, oh, I'm going to be good. This is a stable company. Everything's great. We make money, our stock price is great. But if we're not growing 500%, quarter over quarter, then we're failing. Right. So I think that has created a layer of just overall distrust in work, in just the world of work, period, like tech or otherwise. You're seeing a lot more mistrust by employees. You're also seeing younger generations who are prioritizing themselves. They're prioritizing their health. They're prioritizing like, I'm not living to work. I work to live to work, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I want to live my life. I want to also like enjoy the money that I'm making. And I'm not going to give of myself to a company, because also I come from an era that that was led by Gen X. I'm a geriatric millennial is what I call myself, because I'm at the very top end of being a millennial. But my influences and mentors were those of a generation before me. And it was always like, you work hard, you give everything, you blood, sweat, tears, promotions will come, but you got to work around the clock. And that's like how my mindset was like, that's how I came up in the working world. That's not it anymore. And so I think some of that is that, where people are just like, screw this. I think also, and people are going to come for me in pitchforks. I think there's like it's funny. I talk to like a lot of my HR besties, and I often are just like, how could people not see that? Like, how could people not understand this or that? And I'm like, hold on a second. I think you think that most HR executives and teams are as like forward leaning, strategic focused, like they understand the business strategy in a way that they can intersect with the people strategy. I think you think more people have that skill set or that capability than I actually think is happening in the world of HR. And I tend to surround myself with like-minded folks who are challenged and are challenging themselves in a very similar way. And they're like, okay, AI is coming. I got to lean into this. I got to learn it. I'm curious. I want to build it. I don't think that is the world. I don't think that's a lot of HR leaders. I actually don't think that is even the majority in the conversations I've been having just even over the last 3 weeks about this very topic. And I also think when you are in organizations that look at HR like a back office cost center and not as a like forward leaning strategic and like advisory type of a function, then yeah, you're always going to be caught on your back foot. Like you're always going to think that like you're replaceable and your job can be automated, because you don't really have to use much critical thinking skills in your job, because we're just paper pushing and we're just pressing buttons and we're just doing a bunch of manual shit that like we could eventually automate, and then you don't need people. And I think there are a lot of organizations that are like that don't value the HR function as like a real strategic driver. And that is not just on the company, that's also on the HR leaders. And I also think I fundamentally believe that AI transformation should 100% live within HR if that HR leader is a more modern, sort of forward-looking type of an HR leader. I think if you come from an old time where it was very transactional, it's just talent acquisition and employee relations and benefits and that's all it is, I think you're going to struggle. But those of us that have like, this is where I think my non-traditional HR background really comes in well, because my natural inclination is to think about the business and where is the business, and then think about, okay, how do I get the people to where they need to be such that they're seeing growth and development and they understand that while the business is also getting what it needs. And I'm finding that intersection. I just don't think there's a lot of HR leaders like that, or even talking like that, and have built enough trust. That's the other thing. How many times I hear in my own organization, wow, you're the coolest HR leader I've ever worked with. And I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, I mean, like I've worked with other companies with HR and they were not our friend. They were shitty. They like didn't want to talk to us. They like, it always felt like they were just protecting the company. They didn't care about us and what the people needed. They didn't listen to us. And then like, so many all the time on a weekly basis, I hear this, and it makes me sad, because I think there are a lot of us out there that are trying to do something different and think about the future and how to build in the now. I think all of that lends itself to why you're seeing fear in HR teams, because I am really direct with my team where I'm like, look, I am going to continue to push on you guys about AI. I'm going to continue to make sure that I carve out time for you all to test and learn and figure it out. I was like, I am telling you this not because I'm trying to scare you. I am telling you this because I care about you. I care about your development, whether it's at Vidyard or it's the next company you go to. You have to build these skills. It's not going away. You need to figure out how to partner with these tools, and you need to test and learn tools. You need to carve out the time. Sarika, how do you make the time? I was like, I do it on my own time a lot. Like, when like I'm done with meetings, I will like schedule a block of time where I'm just like focused on AI and I'm testing tools, or I might be demoing a new tool and I want to check out their AI capabilities. I mean, we've been demoing a new ATS. We've demoed, a new performance and engagement tool. We demoed Kinfolk. I give myself space to do that. And I'm like, you need to give yourself space and permission to do that. But I'm telling you, you need to do it. And I'm not trying to scare you. You have to, because you're not going to position yourself for a very productive future then. And you're going to find yourself having a hard time finding the next job.
I'm also an AI optimist, but I think to have the future that we want as humans, we're going to need HR to lead this change. I've been maybe listening to too much content, like on like the doomsday scenario.
Yes.
And like it is scary to hear that the CEOs of like 4 of these big AI companies believe that there's a 25% chance that it leads to extinction. Like, that's terrifying to hear.
But that's also a great headline to get listens to a podcast.
Yeah.
Like
it is a good headline.
A lot of it is clickbait too, though.
I think so. I don't want to take us down a tangent, but let's talk about use cases. So yes. I know that onboarding was one of the first big use cases. Mm-hmm. What was the problem, and what did the first version of the solution look like? I feel like a lot of companies right now are in the just buy the AI tool mode, but the hard truth is most AI projects don't fail because of the tech. They fail because the company's not ready for it yet. If you've listened to any of our recent episodes, I'm sure you've noticed a pretty consistent theme from people like Brandon Samut or Melanie Naranjo. Real transformation only sticks when your people trust the systems you introduce, understand the why, and feel equipped to use the tools in front of them. Clarinet helps teams figure that out before they spend any money or political capital. They help you think about questions like, do your people actually trust AI in their day-to-day work? Are your data, processes, and policies ready for AI-powered decisions? Do leaders know where AI will create value and where it's just noise? They actually have an AI readiness snapshot that gives you a clear, unbiased picture of where you stand today and what needs to be true for AI to really work in your org. You'll walk away with a simple, prioritized view of where AI can have a real impact, the risks and gaps you need to address, and the next steps to move from we should do AI to here's our plan. If you're feeling stalled out in your company's AI journey, this is where you should start. Go take Clarinet's AI readiness snapshot right now. You can find the link in the show notes below.
Yeah. So the problem we were having was 2 things. One, I wanted to create an experience where there was like a real pre-boarding, because what we were finding was we had iterated on onboarding since I got here. Like, I'm probably on like the 6th iteration of onboarding. I've only been here 3 years. And what I realized was we were trying to fit a lot of content when someone starts that day one, that week one, they're meeting with the people team. They're getting like you're sitting in that room. It's all this information. Half of it's you're glossed over. Probably the thing you're paying most attention to is your benefits and how do you elect your benefits. Otherwise, you're probably tuning everything out. And I had younger talent on the team like, I think this is a lot of content. They're like, it would be really cool if we could like provide some of this content ahead of time. So then people got really comfortable. Like, okay, I know what I'm walking into. I know who's who. Would it be fun to like get messages from the executive team, from my manager, from my team, learn about the culture, like read up on some documents. So that period of time when you're like, kind of done with the existing job, you may have some time in between and you just want to feel comfortable and like less nervous day one or week one. So that was part of it. The other part of what we had with the existing onboarding experience, and this was even after we had try to do some automation and checklisting when we went to HiBob as our HRIS, which was leaps and bounds better than where we had come from, with our previous HRIS. But we found that it wasn't as it would like come in their Slack and it would like come into their flow of work, but it wasn't dynamic enough. Like if I did this thing on the checklist that I needed to do as a manager, I should be able to click it in Slack and it updates in HiBob. Like that wasn't happening. And then it was hard for us to track, like, were managers getting all their tasks done to like really prepare for this new hire to come on board. We only had on average 55% task completion from our new hire managers to like have onboarding elements done, which is like, I'm like, guys, that has an impact on the new hires experience. Like my team owns an element of onboarding, but we don't own all of onboarding because a large portion of their onboarding is the work that they're going to be doing on your team. And so there's like real work to be done. And, we've created the templates we've done all the things to enable you. And what we found when we really dug in with them is like, it's just a lot, Sarika. Like it's a lot to like, I got to schedule this and I got to talk to this person. It's like just a lot of administrative things on top of already administrative things we have with our existing employees. And then, the work that we have to do to like get back to growth and build on this new product that we're building. So that was sort of like, okay, how do I improve the experience for our hiring managers such that they actually do the things that we need them to do? But what are the real value added things that I need them to do? And day one, week one, and what are some of those things where in a perfect world, if I could automate that doesn't impact the new hires experience in a negative way. And in fact, it's actually positive because it allows you to automate all the touch points that you have and all the meetings. And so that's where it came from, because our new hire experience satisfaction was also starting to decline. And then I would say, use the data that you collect. That's going to give you the best insights. We were also seeing that we were starting to see attrition, within that, 6 to 12 month range. And I'm like, well, this is a problem. Like, cost us how much money to hire somebody, how much time and energy? Like, I don't want to lose somebody at 6 to 12 months. And so all of that sort of came into play. And then I was like, okay, if we were to redesign this, what would we want it to look like? Like, if we were to reimagine pre-onboarding and create a pre-boarding experience, what would be the ideal scenario? This is what I did with my team. And so we mapped it out. We're like, this is what we ideally would like to do. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to take this and I'm going to go and explore like what types of tools are there out there. And then I stumbled across Kinfolk by way of like the LinkedIn, content. And then that's when I reached out to Jeet and I'm like, look, this is my problem. Can you help me? And it's interesting, like, God, where Kinfolk was over a year ago, and where they are now, it's like incredible how much they have built in that product. Because when we joined on, what they mainly had was runbooks. And runbooks are really what allow you to automate different experiences. It allowed us to create a microsite for pre-boarding. And then that means that someone could come into this microsite ahead of time and start to learn about the company. And then they would have these nudges that would get sent to them or other people across the team. You could I meet with everybody within their first 1 to 2 weeks. That is automated. I don't have to run and schedule that. It's like automatically scheduled. It's in my calendar, before the person even starts. We did that across everybody. And so what we were finding, and then we looked at, okay, managers don't need to do this, and this. We can create this and we can do this within Kinfolk, and the Kinfolk will spit it out. All I have to do is remind them to fill out these components, and they could do that. If they wanted to do it in Slack, they could, or they could go into the document. What we found though is we simplified the experience for hiring managers. We automated the elements, the administrative components that like just weren't getting done, that were really important, because that's the face-to-face connection points that are really going to make a real impact for a new hire. And then what I was able to do is I ended up I talked about someone's job being like a coordinator to like coordinate people's schedules. I'm like, that's a bullshit job. You don't even need to do that. So then now that person really owns on pre-boarding and onboarding, and also became our next recruiter. Like, she was able to now become like a talent acquisition specialist. And that's where she was really passionate of the work that she was doing, is connecting with people through connecting with candidates. And now she owns that and onboarding, and was able to level up her career. I didn't have to let go of anybody. I just repurposed the role. I just basically gave her an elevated role with more of the things that she's really great at and where she wanted to learn. And I'm getting more like outcomes being driven rather than just having a coordinator. And we went from 55% task completion within the first 3 months, to 97% task completion with our managers. And we saw our new hire satisfaction rate also grow to about 98% within those first 3 months.
Wow.
Now we've done iterations since then where we're just adding more to it, but that was sort of iteration 1 with Kinfolk.
There are things I want to talk about. So cut back in V at this point. So you are so right. I met Kinfolk not even a year ago. I met them at Unleash, I think this year.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And where their product has gone from like when I met them at Unleash to like last week, what they were demoing, has been truly impressive. And I think it goes back to your point around being AI first and being AI native versus being a SaaS product doing with AI components, there's a huge difference like
There is.
between those, from like SaaS company with AI elements to being AI native. Like you've made that transition
That's
ish
right.
or mostly to being like truly AI first. And
Mhm.
the product velocity just seems to be very, very different. And I
Very.
think that onboarding is such a perfect place to start. I want to, because we don't have a ton of time left, I want to switch gears to coaching, because I believe this came up in the prep call.
Yeah.
I personally, and this is like, some people think I'm weird for this, but I feel like I would trust an AI coach that has access to all my call records, all like my granola, my fireflies, like literally everything. I'm interacting with it to get feedback on emails I've drafted, on strategy decks that I'm putting together for Daniel and myself. Like it knows so much. So the concept of having an AI coach that literally has tapped into everything and is constantly like engaged with me versus a human coach that like maybe I have an hour-long session with once every couple weeks or once a month. It doesn't even feel comparable when I look at it the way I look at it. Now, a lot of people think that's strange. And so tell us a little bit about, why you're looking at coaching as like a next use case. I believe you may even be piloting something that you've built with Kinfolk's help. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's a great segue. I mean, we had launched our first AI Vidyardian earlier this year, and that is actually connected to our AI IT service management tool. And so what Yardly does is essentially it can pull from, public Slack messages, can pull from like our AI note taker recordings if you want it to. It pulls from all of our like Google Docs, our Confluence pages, all that stuff. So it'll help surface information a lot faster, and you can interact directly with Yardly. So Yardly, and we've gone through a lot of iterations of Yardly. We're still coaching, training it, but that's what gave us the idea of like, okay, well, we saw such a cool transformation within the business of like, because we gave Yardly like a personality, we made an avatar for it. We like, it has its own profile. It like reports into IT and security. Like we had some fun with it. And we realized that people weren't so scared of like interacting with like an AI bot, or an agent, if you will. And so it was like a good like pilot, and we learned a lot from that. And I'm like, okay, well, gee, here's what we're doing with our IT service management ticket, but like from a broader, like a more macro view of like a lot of different things within our business to surface information faster because we are a remote first company. Can we use that same logic and build as Kinfolk as the backdrop, as the powering agent behind that? And we'll call Kinfolk Kinley. And that'll be like the Slack interface. And Kinley is like our next AI Vidyardian. And she is more of like a people business partner or people coach. And because what I had been doing before that was building out a custom GPT inside of ChatGPT, because we have our business licenses with them. And I was testing that concept out inside of ChatGPT, and I was telling Jeet this. He's like, but why don't you just do this in Kinfolk? I'm like, I didn't know that I could. He's like, yeah, because Kinfolk is powered by ChatGPT. And then obviously they put bounds and nuances, and you define what those sort of like bounds are around it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, well, if I could do that, then the interface is with Kinley. They don't have to go to their GPT. And then the cool thing about that is I can see in the backdrop, because Kinfolk also has its own sort of like ticketing tool backdrop. And so I can see anytime an employee is engaging with Kinley and what questions it's asking, and I can see how Kinley is responding. And Kinley will pull from, now it directly integrates with our Confluence rather than having to upload documents. It'll directly, it can connect to a lot of different places within our tech ecosystem. And so it knows what our competencies are. It knows what trainings we've given on like feedback. And it could even probably pull, we're testing out, like, can it pull from like past performance reviews, or to your point, like, can it pull from like our fellow note taker? And then you ask it questions like, hey, I'm a senior people ops specialist, but I really want to get promoted. What do you think I need to work on? Like, what do you think are my development areas, or what are like the main competencies? Because what I'm realizing is people would rather interact dynamically with someone on Slack or with a bot in some cases, if they're not going to get the real person, rather than going and searching for the information on Confluence and reading a bunch of documentation. So could we do this in a way that was dynamic and really fun, knowing that? And the idea behind this is not to replace the manager's role in that with their direct reports. It's almost supposed to provide like a tier 0, almost tier 1 support, like help employees. Because I always say this to employees, it is not your career and your development and your growth is not your manager's responsibility. It is your responsibility. It is your career. You have to articulate what it is that you want in your career. We are not mind readers. I'm a human being just the same as you. I am not a mind reader. I would rather you articulate what you want and what you don't want, and then let me help you figure out how we can curate the best of experiences for you to develop those skill sets such that you could get promoted or you could do the next thing. I've done that in my own career, so I 100% get that. What the idea Kinley as a coach would do is to create that tier 0, tier 1 to help employees sort of problem solve this and like come up with a plan so that when they come to their manager, they've really spent some time thinking this through. I'm like, okay, this is what I want. This is where I need your help. This is what I think my IDP should look like. Here's where I need you. And now the manager and the employer are having such a much more productive, impactful conversation than just where a lot of my managers have had to deal with. It was like, they come to me and they're like, I don't know. I want to get promoted, but what do I do? Like, I don't know. And then what are managers supposed to do with that? Like, they're not, managers are also not developed as coaches, right? We do as much development and enablement as we can, on our systems and our competencies and and what our ecosystem of growth and development and people policies look like, but they're not developed or coached to be coaches. And so this is where I'm like, could we use this? And we've tested out some iterations. We've opened up the bounds of ChatGPT a little bit on how they respond. I'm like, oh no, that's like too short-winded. I need it a little bit longer. I need more detail. I want it to do this. And so we've been doing a lot of piloting and kind of going back and forth. We've launched Kinley version 1 already. We're pretty new into it, but we did a lot of back and forth with Jeet and the Kinfolk team to kind of figure out what's that sweet spot for us.
These are two of the more advanced use cases that we've heard on the podcast, both onboarding and Kinley.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I mean, maybe it's just different. Like we haven't heard these exact use cases. And the way that you're speaking to I could just be making assumptions. It feels like it was somewhat of an easy build. Like you had this idea, you found a partner, and using that partner and their technology, you were able to build the stuff that you wanted to build. Am I interpreting that correctly?
I think that's fair. I think what probably helped us is we are far along outside of any tech or tool. Like we have been spending since I got here 3 years ago, right? We've been spending a lot of time thinking about what career development and career growth looks like and building out career paths and competencies and tying that to performance and building a performance process and enabling our managers and teaching a lot of that content had already been developed over the course of the last, 2 or so years. And I also think you bring up a really important point in this is that I am fortunate enough that I have found a partner in somebody like Jeet and Kim as co-founders of Kinfolk of like, hey, could it do this? I think also it's like reimagining the way that we work. I'm not scared to think about where a bot or a tech tool or a bot could not replace the human, but just optimize humans' capability in these lower level tiers so that we can optimize and enable our managers to be able to do more and have more profound conversations with their teams. I think my mind worked that way. And since I don't know, when you talk to these founders that are building from, AI native companies, the cool thing about them is the way that they think, nothing to them feels insurmountable. Like, oh yeah, I bet you we could build that. I bet you, and you're going to ask me this, and I'm going to obviously spoiler alert, what my word of the year or what my, favorite word in 26 is going to be reimagining. We all need to be reimagining the way that we have always worked, and what we've always thought was possible is no longer impossible with where this technology is going. And I think that might be why it was a little bit easier. Now, it's easy to come up with all the ideas. It is take a little bit of time. It's taken us some time to kind of go back and forth and figure out. And I want my team more involved in it as well, whereas I'm not the one driving all of this. So that's taking a little bit of time because they're doing their day job and trying to do this. But I want them to learn. But I think it's more, and then, within that, I have a community of other people who use Kinfolk, and we will get on the call and kind of share ideas. How are you using it? How are you not? But that might be why, I come up with these crazy ideas. I'm like, can I do this? Why not?
And I guess with the building part of it, I think it's hard for people to imagine what it looks like building the impossible in these new breed of tools. Can you paint a picture? What does it look like when you're logging into a tool like Kinfolk? how does it work? Is it like being in ChatGPT? Is it
Um,
like being in a Zapier? Is it like a combination of the both?
it's
Like,
probably
what do these tools look like?
Probably like a combination of the both. Probably more like a Zapier than it is ChatGPT though, just because you're building the systems to be able to do different types of activities. Like whereas ChatGPT is it's just the generative, like it just asks a question and it spits it out. Kinfolk, they have, run books, they have their knowledge base, and then they have their agents, and then they have workflows. So there's like that's why I feel like it's more like a Zapier in a way, mixed with like building your custom GPTs inside. What I will say, and I've given this feedback, and this is something that Jeet and Kim have really been trying to figure out, is like, and I think this is the tough part with a lot of tools, even tools like Zapier, because I've tested out and I'm playing around in Zapier a lot these days as well, is it's easier than like coding, because right, these are no code solutions, but it's still not easy for people to use a different part of their brain to think about how they're going to build a robot that's going to essentially, right, like simplistically, build a robot to go do these things on your behalf. And you have to like test and learn to figure out how you're going to give it instructions, how detailed a prompt needs to be able to get you the right output for what you want this agent to do or not. You have to tell it what to do and what not to do. And you kind of have to create boundaries around it. And I think that's the part that's hard. And what the Kinfolk team is trying to do is, okay, and because I've always said, like, technology, like, you should design a process that you think works best for your organization, and the technology should be able to enable that. You shouldn't have to retrofit a process to the technology, right? Like, ideally, the technology is flexible enough to build what you desire. But where we were trying to think about with Kinfolk is like, there's some of these like typical use cases that people are going to use AI for and agents for. Is there a way where you build like a library of these things that are almost like a plug and play, and then that's a good starting point, and then people can tweak from there based off of their particular environment or their particular tweaks they want to make with their process? And I think that's a lot of what they've been thinking through, and a lot of what they've been building in the backdrop is like, how do we make it that it feels easier and it's a bit of a plug and play versus someone's got to come in there. There's a learning curve. Like, even with Zapier, there's a learning curve. You have to like get your mind wrapped around how you build these apps and how you connect it. Once you do that enough times, it does become second nature. But it takes a minute, and that's I think that's a challenge, is not everybody has a ton of time to really invest. And I think where businesses are, especially in SaaS, a lot of companies aren't growing right now. A lot of companies are layering, right, AI capabilities, trying to refine product market fit. They have less headcount than they did once upon a time because maybe they didn't grow, maybe they contracted, they had to do layoffs for any myriad of reasons, that being one of them. And so there's a lot more stress and pressure inside of our environments that doesn't really give us a lot of space to think. And then it becomes, oh, you have to spend your own time, your personal time kind of doing this. And then I go back to what I said 20 minutes ago, is like, less and less people are willing to do that because they want that time. Right.
Yeah.
And I think this is sort of like the double-edged sword and sort of this like self-fulfilling prophecy we're in right now, that we got to figure out how to break that. And I think this is where the AI native companies are going to have to figure out how to make these tools simpler to use than what they have been.
For every cool Zap that is like truly badass that I've built, there are 3 Zaps that I never finished because it was overly complicated, or the integrations didn't quite work, or like whatever, like it just didn't add value. Like that's a thing too. Like, just because it's in the library doesn't mean it's going to work for your company the way that it's working for. So it's very complicated. And I think, you hit on exactly why, I think I'm closing the year with not skepticism, like concern for sure, maybe a little skepticism, I guess a desire for more conversations like this with HR leaders, because I feel like, this is hard, and their time isn't opening up, and budgets aren't opening up, and they may never open up like they once were. And the reality is, like, on LinkedIn, you either have like this isn't just LinkedIn, it's just society where we're at today. It's like either doom and gloom, like you can't use AI until all the problems with AI are solved, and we're really sure it's not a Terminator situation we're going to, or it's like, use AI for everything. I did 100 things with AI and I transformed the world. And it's like, those I don't like either of those
I
options.
like a balanced approach.
Yeah, can
No,
we
I get
find
it.
somewhere in the middle?
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, the only way the people that are like figuring this out have rolled their sleeves up and have had to like do the hard work to figure it out, and we don't all have that time. And so that's like, how do we reconcile that? I continue to be an optimist, and I think we'll figure it out. It won't be easy, but we got this. Like, there's a lot of smart people that are doing a lot of cool things and want to help the
I
broader
think
community.
doing more of what you all did at MPL last week, when I was really excited when the Kinfolk team told me what you all were doing with like these live demos or these live like hands-on keyboard, here's a use case, here's how we build it. Heba did the same thing at Safe Space Summit, back in August, where I went in and talked about specific use cases of how we were using AI, and then how I was connecting these AI tools together, or connecting the founders on like, figure out how you guys can integrate, because that would be really cool. And here's why this would be cool. And so I think it will come. But I think, to your point, I mean, this is like, we need to stop having the conversations on like, what do you think about AI? And what do you think the future is going to be? Like this, like macro level. We need to be having more conversations like this, like in the tactical granular. And like, I know the tactical isn't as sexy, but that's where, at least on the HR front, that's where people are really grappling with. It's like, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I tactically do that? Like, I don't even know where to begin. So we need to be doing more in the community and like, I think demonstrating and demoing these types of things for folks.
Oh, well, there comes a time in every podcast where we have to bring it to a close. This one, I feel like, could just keep going. We started 10 minutes before we hit record. I feel like we could go another 30 minutes. It's been awesome to have you on the show. We're not done yet. We have a couple ritual segments left to go. The next one is what we call rapid fire questions. We ask all of their guests the same set of questions. We'll get through them as quickly as we can. You ready to do this?
Yes.
All right. First question. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting in HR today?
Learn everything in HR. Not all at once, but I would say or especially early on in your career, it's better to be a generalist than a specialist. I think it's important, like you may be in people ops and learning a lot about systems and processes, but it's just as important that you understand how talent acquisition operates and how people ops and talent acquisition, intersect, and how you all support one another. I think it's just as important for talent acquisition to understand compensation and why we come up with the bands that we do and how we position people and what the salary ranges are. Like, I just think there's so much to learn across the whole like gambit of HR, and try to be more of a generalist than a specialist.
That's great advice. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
It would have to be like a play off of like energy or passion, like Energetica or something ridiculous like that.
I love that.
Like, I don't know, like it would have to, or like, what's a word off of passion? Passionita. I don't know. Something around that vein.
Energetica and Passionita are both amazing.
I don't know.
You gotta copyright those.
Go back and see what other people have answered this.
Next question. If you could steal one strategy, business, HR, like whatever, from another company, what would it be?
I would call out Zapier and what Brandon Smith's team is doing. I love how much they've been building out loud. He knows how I say this to him all the time, and I say it publicly. Like, I love how they're building out loud. I love how he has been able to reposition the value that his team brings to the world of like, automation. And I think there's AI in there, but they were right for it. They're a company about automations. And so this was like perfect era of innovation for them, but they really capitalized on this, and they're doing it all across all functions and getting their leaders involved and building, publicly, and people are learning and getting excited about that. And so I've really admired that strategy and what they're doing there.
Just in the last maybe 2 or 3 months, we've had at least 5 people call out Zapier in that question.
Is that right?
Yeah. They're definitely onto something.
That's awesome.
Last rapid fire question. Who do we need to have onto the show next? If there were like 1 or 2 people, either from your network or that you follow on LinkedIn, who's a new voice that we need to have on here?
Okay, there's a couple. So I don't want to say her last name wrong. She just hit 10,000 followers, 15,000 followers herself. Stephanie Fackrell. Stephanie, I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. I'll send you her thing. Stephanie Fackrell. She's like, I think she might be fractional. I could be wrong. I love her content. She builds a lot out in the open. She's very honest. She's very like funny and endearing. And she's been really great. And I just think she's got like just a really cool perspective about what she's doing within HR. So she would be one that I think would be great to have on. And then if I were to go more on like the HR tech path, either ChartHop or Lana Peters from Clar. I don't know if you've heard much about Clar, but they are a predictive AI performance and engagement tool. And Chartok is the founder. He was an HR business partner for a number of years and was just like, oh my God, I hate all these HR tech tools and they're not built by HR folks. Like, I want to do this differently. And so I love his perspective on like performance engagement and where AI can fit into this in a way to like really enable our people, but also our managers, and how it integrates into a lot of the different tools of like that you use where people work day in and day out. And if not Chartok as the founder, Lana Peters is their new CRO. She also well known. I believe she led revenue teams at HiBob a few years ago as HiBob was growing, especially like growing their brand awareness in the US. But either of those two folks from Cloud would be excellent people to have on the pod as well and hear a bit about how they're building and what they're doing differently.
Amazing. Well, we'll have to reach out to all of them. And that gets us to the end. The final tradition, we call it one word close. It can be a word or a few, just from the last hour and change we spent together, how we want to wrap things up. And we prefer for our guests to go first.
What my word? Okay. So my word would be reimagining, like reimagination, like reimagine the way that you work and the way processes have been set up and, you know, what you've known to be true in the ways that functions have operated, like be prepared to come in curious as all get out in 2026 and just reimagine those, like any process really.
I'm going to say Energetica. I think that is the perfect superpower nickname for you. I'm not going to lie. I've had like a post-event, for lack of a better word, hangover. The week following having a big event, you're just like so drained. And I needed this. I feel re-energized.
Same.
Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad.
You know what? I'll go with Passionista. I forget what why not? Why not? It's fun to talk about things that your guests, there's no better pod than being passionate about something and feeling that genuine passion from the person you're interviewing. And, you know, you said it at the beginning, it feels like we know each other. Now we do know each other.
Now we do.
We do know each other.
Besties.
So thank you for bringing those stalker vibes our way, JK. Like we can edit that out, but it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Jeep, for connecting us.
Yes. Shout out to Kinfolk.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.